Back on with big news coming through. The National Commission for Minorities has written to Home Minister Amit Shah demanding an NIA probe into the rampant religious conversions of Christian girls to Islam in Kerala. The Vice Chairman, George Kurian, in a letter to the Home Minister has said young Christian girls are being radicalized, seeking stern action and a strong law. He has also added that girls from the Christian community are soft targets for terror recruiters.
Cannot say it is religious conversion. They are converting these girls to terrorism. Because in 2012, 21 persons from Kerala, they joined IS and they went to Syria for fighting for IS. After 21, 5 were converted from Christianity. I have written that this Kerala Catholic Bishop Conference, they have appointed a commission. That commission found out that between 2006 and 9, around more than 2,600 girls were converted to Islam. Demanded that NIA inquiry and make effective these laws to prevent this kind of activities.
Minorities Commission has basically written to the Home Minister and to the NIA expressing their concern and saying that Christian girls in Kerala become more and more vulnerable to becoming Islamic radicalist target.
Well, I don't see any connection between the fact that they are Christians, because we have seen that other religions, including Hinduism, Jainism, they are also being targeted by this love jihad. This is a opinion of the Minorities Commission. It must be taken seriously and it should be investigated further.
Payal Mehta now joins us live. Payal, now this is something which VS Achyutanandan has been citing this. There is also George Kurian coming out and saying that between 2006 and 2012, 2009, 2,600 conversions had happened. A lot of them were from the Christian community, and there is concern raised by even the Kerala Catholic community.
Well, absolutely. Mr. Kurian, in this letter that he's written to the Home Minister and also to the NIA, clearly has expressed his concern over the situation, citing in this case example of 2 girls and 2 cases as well. But he says, while he spoke to us, that this is not the only case, these are not the 2 cases only that he's referring to. This is a rampant issue, and that's why he's worried, because he's spoken about these girls, one of these girls being taken to West Asia and of course being tortured, being raped, and the other girl also being tortured and by the people who wanted to forcibly convert her. And he clearly says that this is not a case of conversion, this is not a case of love jihad. He essentially says that this is conversion to terrorism, something which he really fears might cause further harm. That's one of the reasons he wants the NIA immediately to intervene in this matter, and he also wants the Home Minister to look into it and see if they can come up with a strong conversion law or anti-conversion law. Anand.
Well, so clearly, because this was a story that was also built around the cases that we saw, which also went to the Supreme Court in the girls of Hindu girls getting converted, and that this entire aspect of love jihad. But George Kurian is coming out and saying that there is a concern that's emerged from within the fraternity, within the community in Kerala, that Christian girls are being converted and then they are being subjected to terrorism, because he has also cited 2,600 girls converted to Islam between 2006 and 2009, and then he says in 2012, 21 persons from Kerala joined the Islamic State and went to Syria, Daesh, and went to Syria, and he says 5 of these 21 girls were Christian girls who had been converted.
Exactly, so while I was asking him these questions, Anand, I specifically asked him if he had any detailed inputs, because obviously since he's also a BJP appointee, the charges against him would be that he's probably trying to target one particular community. So that is when he came up with these facts, and he said these are the facts to prove, and there are many such cases to prove that these are the girls who are more vulnerable, these are the girls who are soft targets for conversion, and that's one of the reasons that these extremist forces are making most of it, making use of it, and taking these women into forcible conversions and then taking them over to Syria, etc. And with the kind of footprints that one has seen in Kerala as far as the IS is concerned, there certainly has been an issue that has been raised in the past as well, both by the RSS as well as the BJP, and now it's before the central government to take a call.
Right. Thanks for the inputs, Payal. Thank you very much. Well, we'll follow the news break further and also get reactions from the Kerala Chief Minister and, of course, from the centre, the MHA, and, of course, those in the NIA, whether they're going to take cognizance and the reactions on ground. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just news that's just come in here on The Right Stand. Moving on and setting up debate number 2 on The Right Stand this Tuesday evening. In the wake of unprecedented bonhomie, now it is time to get down to absolute business. Modi and Trump, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, President Donald Trump will have a bilateral meeting in a short while from now, set to begin from 9:45 p.m. Indian time, where Prime Minister will aim to pitch his connect with the US President to usher in a new phase in terms of defense, trade, diplomatic ties to take on the China-Pakistan combined. The opinion on Donald Trump is divided. He's seen as mercurial, sometimes fickle by some, and a man of his word or somebody who stays steadfast to his commitment by others. But India, for us, which aims to boost its diplomatic clout and also improve trade and the influence within the American scheme of things, can Trump become that friend, that ally that can help the Modi Sarkar achieve this aim? First, let's listen into what Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who showered praise on Donald Trump in Houston, said about Donald Trump, where he says he has taught him the art of the deal.
वैसे तो प्रेसिडेंट ट्रंप मुझे टफ नेगोशिएटर कहते हैं, वो खुद भी द आर्ट ऑफ द डील में माहिर है और मैं उनसे बहुत कुछ सीख रहा हूं.
That is a lot of effusive praise for somebody who's seen as a person who just does not know how to handle the president's office, and he's in the wrong place as the president of the country. That's what many of Donald Trump's critics maintain, but Prime Minister Narendra Modi believes this man knows what he is doing. A diplomacy flashpoint is Kashmir. On the 23rd of September 2019, Trump says he can mediate if asked to. Now, this is one aspect. Then, if you look at it, on the 26th of August 2019 at the G7 summit, Trump says Kashmir is a bilateral issue. Then on the 20th of August 2019, Donald Trump offers to mediate explosive standoff. On the 2nd of August 2019, Trump says, if they wanted me to, I would intervene. He's also said during the meeting with Imran Khan, Trump says Modi asked him to mediate. India immediately denied it, and thereafter the previous issues happened then. Now, why is this flip-flop? What is Trump trying to do? This was at a time that there was a little bit of a frost between the Indo-US relationships right through 2018, largely around data colonization, data privacy, data sovereignty, and the issue of data, and of course, trade tariffs and the engagements with Iran. The US flip-flop was to put pressure on India to gain the upper hand in the trade wars. Affects global firms to see India as a favorable business destination, divert India's diplomatic efforts to explaining Kashmir instead of the trade focus. Now, these are all the issues. So Trump is also going to arm twist India to get what he wants, because he's going to put America first, while Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to put India first. So this Trump plus trust, can PM Modi crack this equation? That's the question that we're asking. Can we turn it to a strategic advantage? This personal bonhomie and the Houston advantage, can it turn into something bigger? Before we dive into the debate, Modi-Trump talks is the hashtag. Let's go across. Let's go across straight to Bhupendra Chaubey, our executive editor, joining us live from New York. Bhupen, in a short while from now, they're going to sit across, and it's a long round of bilateral engagements. What is going to be India's biggest challenge? Can we exact our pound of flesh from POTUS?
Well, that statement that you just played, which was made by Prime Minister Modi in Houston, and a statement which was made while POTUS was sitting in the audiences, it gives you some kind of an idea about practical realities on the ground and the strategy which is being executed by the Indian side. Piyush Goyal, the Railways Minister and Prime Minister's key economic advisor, so to say, or economic executioner, strategist, is here with us as well, and he's leading a separate round of trade-based discussions with various stakeholders. The realization within the Indian side is very straightforward. The realization is that as far as dealing with Pakistan is concerned, It's a battle which India will have to fight on its own. And it appears that Donald Trump, just on the basis of what we saw in Houston and the kind of statements that were made, whether it was Donald Trump's straightforward assertion that every country has the right to protect its own borders and that radical Islamic terrorism is indeed a reality of our times, and Prime Minister, without naming Pakistan, did draw enough inferences to convince everybody that he was indeed talking about Pakistan. So as far as terror in Pakistan is concerned, it's India's own battle. As far as trade and business is concerned, I think that is where there is hope that India and America can get themselves on a better negotiating or a better dialogue table. There has been some mistrust, there has been some unease in the past. Clearly the Prime Minister wants to put that behind him, and he wants to ensure that whether it's energy or any other part of trade, oil, gas, I'm told that a multi-billion-dollar energy deal is on the talking table today, and it's entirely possible that within the next 24 hours, some kind of a big bang announcement could be made between the two countries.
Is this Houston bonhomie going to translate into some advantage? Because both leaders stopped short of making any big bang announcements from that podium, from that pedestal. You were there, and we were talking about some announcements that could be a possibility from both sides. There were hints to that effect too. They both stopped short. But what's happened in the last 24 hours? Donald Trump stepping in to listen in, suddenly taking a detour to listen in to PM Modi 50 minutes before he meets Imran Khan, praising PM Modi in Imran Khan's presence in front of the Pakistani media. All of these, are they pointing to something substantial? Bhupen.
Well, you know, for you and me, Anand, this could be U-turn, which is being indulged in by POTUS. But if you look at it from American standpoint, and I was talking to some American analysts a short while back, and they said that this is classical American diplomacy. You remember what Barack Obama would say when President Obama went to India, to Mumbai, and what did he say? He said that the job of the US president is first to do business and then act as the president of this country. Donald Trump is doing exactly that. He realizes that he needs Pakistan on his side because he has that uncomfortable scenario which continues to unfold in Afghanistan, where he needs to bring the American boys back home. At the same time, whether it was Houston or it was G5 earlier, he has consistently maintained that India and America need to do much more as far as defense ties or as far as defense part of trade is concerned. He spoke about that in Houston as well. So when the two leaders meet together, I think the focus clearly is going to be what is the level to which defense-based trade or defense-based cooperation can take place between the two countries. And when it comes to energy dialogue, energy-related business, what exactly are the contours which India and America can really fulfill? I think Prime Minister Modi is aware of the fact, and this is something which was stated to me even post that big bonhomie display where the two leaders walked hand in hand all around the NRG Stadium, that President Trump ultimately will not completely dump Pakistan. He wants to do business with India, but he realizes that Pakistan's presence in the region is also significant for him at this stage.
Well, Bhupen Chaubey, something tells me that the rest of Tuesday for you in NYC and the coming Wednesday is going to be very, very busy, because there is going to be something big that's coming out of this bilateral engagement. Thank you very much. Thank you for that update from New York. Let's go across to our panelists and then ask them, is it going to be possible for India to crack this Trump plus trust equation? Ambassador Rajiv Dogra with us, Rajiv Desai with us, Zafar Islam of the BJP with us. But first I'm going to go across to Richard Rosso, who's joining us from Washington. He's part of the Wadhwani chair in the US-India Policy Studies, CSIS. Richard, let me first ask you, is India going to be able to crack this Trump equation? Is Trump as fickle as he's perceived to be?
Well, I think both sides are very familiar with the number of trade issues, the concerns that we've got. So we know what we're dealing with. It's not an unlimited universe, although the list can get kind of long if you take all the trade disputes in total. But the fact that the Minister of Commerce and Industry, Piyush Goyal, made the last-minute trip to to New York, trying to engage last minute to try to cobble together an agreement, tells me that India will put something meaningful on the table. Ultimately, though, I think at best we're looking at a pause in the trade dispute. India's got a major trade deficit with the world, particularly with China. The United States does as well. So I think these issues are going to continue to bob up. But at least if we can get a pause on this rather than a continued escalation of the trade fight, I think that's what we would consider a win out of this bilateral summit.
But Richard, many people believe that this trade these are small creases because the trade gap or the window between India and America is of $148 million, and the sticky issues are somewhere around $5 billion worth of investment. So it's not, if you look at the big picture, such a big issue, and it should not become the big stumbling block. What are the other key takeaways? What is India going to look for, and how much is America going to be willing to give?
That's a terrific question. We know what's on India's ask. They'd like to see the United States give India a waiver on the 232 steel and aluminum tariffs. India would like to see restoration of the generalized system of preferences trade benefits package that we revoked a few months ago. In addition, if there can be accommodations where the United States agrees not to take on additional limitations on H-1B worker visas, which have been contemplated, or additional tariffs that the United States has been considering in areas like automotive components, which are big export areas for India to the United States. So India's agenda, I think, is relatively well known, though I think looking at the full list, GSP, things like that, it's a little bit easier, of course, and more concrete to put things on the table where you move things back rather than a promise that we won't adopt new tariffs or trade restrictions on things like visas. So I think GSP, I think that 232 waiver, there's some of the areas that I think the United States may put on the table to try to make sure that there's a bit of balance in some type of agreement.
Right, Richard, please stay on with us. I'm going to go across to our other panelists, just quickly bringing our viewers also up to speed in terms of the Indo-US trade equations, because trade is going to be the center or the focus along with all the other strategic indulgences. Now, I'm just going to walk back and have a look at the Indo-US trade numbers, which are there on the screen coming up right now, ladies and gentlemen. What stands out at this point as far as the Indo-US trade numbers? Bilateral trade stands at 142 billion. I said 148. I correct myself. Now, US FDI into India is $46 billion. India's FDI into the US is $13.7 billion. And India is also critically going to make a few more investments, especially in Houston among the energy sector. The Petronet deal, which was stuck, is now going to come through, is what we're going to understand. The US goods and services deficit with India is at $24 billion. And $1.1 billion is the deal for the Apache helicopters, with the first batch already being inducted. Then, defense deals worth over $15 billion have been entered into and committed since 2008. But the sticking points, if you look at it, Donald Trump dubbed India as the tariff king, pointed to 50% duties on Harley-Davidson bikes. Now that's what he used, and he says, you're not going to let my bikes in. I'm going to be a little upset about that. Then Trump revoked India's preferential trade privileges, and will that now be revoked, and will that come back into play? That's what Richard Rosso also pointed out to us. It's possible. India imposed retaliatory tariffs on 28 US products. Will that now be taken off? This trade argy-bargy that's going on. Indian price caps on imported medical devices, mostly from the US. It is on the stents. Will there be a leverage there? And under US pressure, India was forced to stop oil imports from Iran and Venezuela. Now, all of these issues stand there, and this was what was talked about when Trump called Prime Minister Narendra Modi a tough negotiator, and PM Modi said he knows the art of the deal. Now, they've stared at each other. They've said, I can do what you can do, and then there's this argy-bargy that's happened. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, after Houston, are we going to smoothen these creases and move forward? Because we need American investments. We need manufacturing to come up here. There have been some strong policy changes made by the government which were announced in Goa just before the Prime Minister left for the US.
Well, you're absolutely right that trade matters to Trump because he has a lobby back home which is getting affected by the trade war with China. For example, pork exports, which were a main export, US export to China, have been stagnating because of the tariff issues. So he wants to sell more pork to India so that he is able to tell his potential voters that, look, I've got a deal which takes care of your interests. But in the larger context of Indo-US relations, these are small matters, and these small matters would be sorted out one way or the other.
Right.
Trump also knows that this is not the big picture. The big picture really for him is the Nobel Peace Prize. And he sees Kashmir as one possible gateway to that Nobel Peace Prize. In fact, a Pakistani journalist asked him this question bluntly. North Korea is dancing circles around him. Iran has him tied up in knots. He doesn't know what to do with them. So he's not going to get his Nobel Peace Prize by solving those two issues. The only one which he feels is doable is Kashmir. But he also realizes this too is a very tough issue to solve. So what does he do? He keeps on repeating the Kashmir mantra that somehow there will be some way out. But at the back of his mind, he has his boys in Afghanistan whom he wants safely out or safely put there in Afghanistan without any new bombs from Pakistan. So these two are the big issues, the Nobel Peace Prize and his boys in Afghanistan. The rest are all the dressing up. And let us not underestimate Trump, because whatever he has promised before his last elections, he has done them. Whether it is the Great Wall of America with Mexico, or the tariffs with China, or the new opening or possible opening to North Korea. So I think there's a lot to learn from his persistence. If they say that diplomacy is the art of patience, I would add that diplomacy is also the art of persistence, as Trump is doing in a very, very bullheaded manner. So there is hope that he might ultimately see reason in what we are persistent.
Well, there is hope is what you're saying, but are you optimistic, Rajiv Desai, before I bring in Zafar Islam? Are you optimistic? Is all this Houston bonhoming, are you seeing through that? Do you believe it's going to translate? Because there have been some never-before moments in terms of optics, in terms of economic or personal equations, but is that going to translate into advantage India? I'm looking at it purely from the Indian perspective, and I'm sure you're going to too.
Well, certainly. There was a festive atmosphere.
Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, I'm just bringing in Rajiv Desai. Sir, if you would allow me. Yeah. Yes, Rajiv Desai.
Yeah. Well, let's look at it this way. Both leaders run a very highly personalized kind of diplomacy. But unlike India, where the Prime Minister and his office are the final word on everything, in the United States, it's not just the White House, it's also the Congress, and it's also the Defense Department, it's also the State Department, it's also various states and so forth that act as a moderating influence on the behavior of a single leader, which is not true in India. So I think that the defense, state, all these other sort of players might see an opportunity to milk this highly personalized kind of diplomacy that Mr. Modi runs to get advantage for themselves. And I think you will see that. I don't think India is going to get very, very much. We've already given in on Iran, we've given it on Venezuela. And I think that basically this is what, by talking about Kashmir, he is essentially suggesting, or people are advising him to bring up Kashmir, to send a message to India that, if you don't behave, we've got Kashmir. We'll get involved in it, and then your whole foreign policy will go for a toss. So I think this is an opportunity for the Americans to use the highly personalized diplomacy of Mr. Modi to their advantage. It's as simple as that in my mind.
Zafar Islam, respond to that, please. Political response, and then I'll go back to Richard Rosso. Yes.
Anand, with this kind of personalized equation between the two premier does help facilitate something which otherwise look impossible.
Right.
So we definitely expect that the Honorable Prime Minister will be able to extract pound of flesh, and of course beyond that. But away from that, let me tell you the 5 important objectives probably, in my view, the Honorable Prime Minister will be having. First, of course, is the terrorism, which partly got addressed in Howdy Modi event.
Right.
Second is, of course, the defense, energy. Energy also got partly addressed in Houston's energy conference, a meeting with the energy CEOs. Third is, of course, the defense, and I'm expecting something positive will definitely be, announcement will be made when the two premier meet and they discuss about it. Fourth is, of course, the most important, if you just see the direction of our budget, it is always, this time it is not the consumption-led economy, but more of export-oriented economy. So the eye is on the global trade. A large portion of the global trade that India is eyeing on. So I'm sure that this bilateral discussion on trade will be the prime focus of the Honorable Prime Minister, and that is something which need to really wait what it translates eventually when the two of them discuss. And finally, this the H1B1 visa, this visa issue also needs to be addressed. So what focus will be on defense and the trade.
Defense and trade will be the focus, but what about the strategic implications? One aspect which stood out was Donald Trump praising PM Narendra Modi with Imran Khan sitting right beside him. And he has also been snubbing, there has been, yes, he's played this game and he's used Trump, he's continued to say that I'm, this offer of arbitrage, the offer of mediation, perhaps, yes, with the Nobel Peace Prize in focus. But he's also come out and said that now I'm not going to say anything beyond this till the time we have the consent from both sides. And perhaps that's the message that India has been able to put across, that you can say what you want, but we are not for it. And he said, till Modi says, I'm not getting into it. So that's the departure which has happened between July and September. Let's just quickly listen to what Donald Trump said and I'll come back. Yes, Zafar, I'll come back. Let's listen in.
Willing to help if both Pakistan, let's say, and India wanted me to do that. I am ready, willing, and able. One without the other doesn't work if you're going to do mediation or if you're going to do an arbitration. I have a very good relationship with Prime Minister Modi. If I can be of help, you know that. If I can be of help, let me know. But you'd have to have the assent also from the other side. I wouldn't say Pakistan has treated us too well either. I was sitting there and I heard a very aggressive statement yesterday from India, from the Prime Minister, and I will say it was very well received within the within the room. The statement itself, that was a big room, there were 59,000 people.
Has India been able to weigh in and win Trump over Richard Rosso, especially on Jammu and Kashmir? Has Trump done enough of this trying to manipulate India around Jammu and Kashmir? What would be your assessment? Is there a change in the tone, especially after what he said during the interaction with Imran Khan and the way he responded to the Pakistani media?
Well, I think with the more forward-leaning language he used on mediation over the summer and the kind of blowback that formally and informally I'm sure that the United States government heard about claiming that Modi asked for an intervention, I'm pretty sure that's more of a direct reason as to why we're sort of toning down the language that the U.S. government uses around that. I think from Delhi's perspective, of course, President Trump going down and engaging with Prime Minister Modi so visibly in Houston, feels that at least we're not going to hold the relationship hostage for what's happened in Kashmir, even if it's not a direct approval of that move and the detentions and other things around it. I think from Washington, the relationship is so much more than just Kashmir, and it's so much more than just looking at India-Pakistan ties. I know from Delhi and Islamabad, in moments like these, when you see President engaging Pakistan so heavily, it feels like the hyphen is back in the relationship in a very big way. But, when you look at the kind of technology controls we're willing to lift for exports to India, when you look at the depth of our military cooperation, the fact that we've cracked open the nuclear non-proliferation regime to bring India in, bringing India onto the other non-proliferation regime. Yes. The distance between how Washington treats the two is so enormous that moments like these, it feels like there's a bit more parity coming back in. But you look at the entire swath of the relationship, the level of trade with India, the investment, it's really sort of comparing, a small relationship that we have with Pakistan, which is focused mostly on Afghanistan, versus the entire totality we have with India, which crosses boundaries and across multiple jurisdictions.
So it is far more an engagement, and America itself has far more to gain with its engagement with India. And you are saying, Richard, you put it so lucidly and so beautifully, where you say that from perceptions, you may believe that Delhi and Pakistan or Delhi and Islamabad are on the same levels as far as America, but in reality it's far different, and India is far more invested, and America is far more invested in India compared to Islamabad or Pakistan. But Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, you spoke about Trump being a man of his word. I just want to quickly put this out. These are the times when Trump has stood by what he has committed and he's gotten it done. And that's why we need to understand this very clearly. He promised 2016 funding blocked by Congress. Trump moved $3.6 billion from Pentagon. That's what he did as far as the border wall with Mexico was concerned. Iran promised and scrapped the Iran nuclear deal despite global outrage. China campaigned against China's economic dominance in the US. He slapped and he maintains high tariffs on Chinese goods despite domestic outcry. And he stood by it. Saudi Arabia, despite the Jamal Khashoggi incidents, he continues to back MBS, and he refuses to scrap the multi-billion-dollar defense deal despite public outcry. And that's about Saudi Arabia. And then let's talk about the Paris climate deal. When he went to the Paris climate deal, he promised and scrapped the accord despite global criticism. He said, I don't care what you think. This is what I believe, and this is in the interest of my interest and my country's interest. I'm going to go ahead and do it. Administration continues to be skeptical about climate change. That's what's happened. And in terms of Russian interference, he's come out and continued to back Vladimir Putin's denial despite proof from his intelligence as far as the election is concerned, and maintains that interference and collusion charge is a hoax. So he's been able to stand his ground, and he's been able to go ahead and push through what he believes in. And Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, is that going to be the key for India to be able to convince Trump that engagement and allowing and further investment between each other is the way forward? Is Prime Minister Modi going to be able to crack that? Because India needs American investments, particularly now, especially after the change revision on the corporate taxes. And of course, the GSP has to be revoked.
Well, absolutely. I think you have put your finger on what is the priority number one in long-term Indo-US relationship, especially the strategic relationship. All these others are add-ons. I would say even trade and defense and so on are small compared to the larger picture. The larger picture is what Nixon Kissinger did towards China by flooding it with technology and investment. That transformed China.
Right.
Now, if US is sincere and serious about its relationship with India and the place it wants India to occupy in tomorrow's world, then it has to do something really big and meaningful in terms of what Trump and his successors, or Trump in avatar number 2 after the elections, can do to this relationship.
Right.
He cannot get bogged down by small things like, pork export or Harley-Davidson tariff and so on. He has to really, in America's own interest, because let me give another example besides China.
Right.
India, for long term, will give dollars to USA in terms of its purchases. Those dollars America finds necessary to give to Pakistan to ensure its good behavior in Afghanistan. But that is not the trap America wants to see itself in for the long term. It wants India to become strong and able enough as a partner of America in ensuring security in this region. That is the big picture.
Right. Thank you, Ambassador Rajiv Dogra. I'm over time, gentlemen, because in a short while from now, as Jacob comes on for brass tacks, we'll also have the two leaders arriving for the bilateral, and it's a long session we are given to understand, at least about 2 hours we're given to understand. As we wind up, here is our opinion on the Modi-Trump talks. Donald Trump clearly is using Jammu and Kashmir issue to arm twist India, has been doing that, but right now there seems to be a settling in that narrative and that tone after Houston. PM Modi will have to negotiate very, very hard. Visible impact of the Houston bonhomie, and we've seen that with Trump taking some extra efforts towards India. Once convinced, Donald Trump shows consistency, and American investment is critical for the economic turnaround of our country, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hope it goes as per script, especially as far as Indian interests are concerned. Thank you for taking the right stand this Tuesday evening. Zaka Jacob with Brass Tags up next.